This is the June market report for Washtenaw County. And Washtenaw County is following, as we've said, in April and May and March going forward, it's followed the same trend of being probably the strongest county real estate-wise in the state. And the trends continue. New residential listings are up overall for the county. Sales are up overall. Values are up overall. All the same trends we've been seeing throughout the year. What we are seeing, though, is because buyer demand is faster than the new listings entering the market, that the inventories continue to fall. And that's unique about Washtenaw, because the rest of Southeast Michigan inventories are actually rising. In Washtenaw, except for the upper end, the $500,000 above, inventories are actually falling because more buyers are entering the market. The good news with that, though, is that there are more listings entering. More sellers are seeing values rising, and there is sort of this pent-up release of listings from hangover from our recession. And sellers are seeing values rising, and they rose about 3.5% for the average sale price this past month, and it's been consistent at 3 or 4%. And actually, it may be for if you look at the under $200,000 market, the appreciation rate we're seeing is probably closer to 7 or 8%, because that market is so strong right now with demand. But overall, we're seeing good, consistent trends. If you look at the number of homes that are selling at or above list price, it's about 35% of homes selling at or above list price. That's faster than it was last year, a higher percentage than last year. Homes that are selling within 10 days or less. And this is across really all price ranges. We're having about 35 to 38% of homes selling within 10 days or less, and 70% of the transactions going on in Washtenaw County are homes selling within 30 days or less. That tells you the velocity. That's compared to about 50% for the rest of Southeast Michigan, so that tells you just how strong the market is. Now, that isn't, again, consistent in every price range. As you can imagine, the lower price ranges are the absolute hottest. The city of Ann Arbor is the absolute hottest. But in the general source of direction of trends, the upper end, $500,000 and above and $1 million and above, are the slowest segment of the market, and that segment is slowing ahead of the others. There still have been more sales in the $500,000 and above, and even the $1 million and above this year compared to last. But we're seeing that there are more listings coming on the market, so sellers in the upper price range are going to feel like the market is slower. There are as many buyers, if not more buyers, but there are even more listings in that price range. So upper end is going to feel slower, and in fact it is slower, which means values probably won't be rising as fast in the upper end as they are in the under $250,000 and maybe even under a $500,000 market. But it's still all good news, and trends are very good across Washtenaw County. The last piece of information, and we touched on it last month, and that is the changes coming up August 1st in how people apply for and get approved for mortgages. The acronym used is TRID, T-R-I-D, but it's the RESPA, TILA, which is Truth in Lending, and all the different forms that buyers filled out at the closing and for application for loans. Those forms are changing, and they're actually changing for the better. They're easier for consumers to understand and follow. But it also requires some time and disclosure time for borrowers to understand the process. So they have 3 days to, the lenders must get the information and the application back to the borrower within 3 days of providing information to the lender. And at the closing time, borrowers must get the closing documents from their lender at least 3 days in advance of closing, so they have time to look at the closing documents. All good changes for the consumer. But from the transaction standpoint, those changes probably will, at least for the balance of this year, cause some delays in the approval process for mortgages. So buyers and sellers need to understand that when they're going into a transaction, that there will be some delays. There'll be typically probably delays in getting the appraisals ordered, which will extend the approval process which typically approval processes are taking about 30 days now. That's sort of the general norm. You can add probably 10 days to that, so maybe 40 days there. Once the loan has been approved and the borrower your loan is approved, typically closing in today's world pre-changes in August, closing anywhere from 5 to 10 days after that. In the new world, it's probably going to be at least 10 days. At least lenders are recommending that we suggest 10 days from the time it's approved to the actual getting your keys at closing. So overall, they're recommending a 10-40-10 term, which is 10 days to get your loan application in to a lender, 40 days for that approval, for the lender to give you the approval, and another 10 days after approval to close. And we think those numbers will work, but the most important thing is that buyers and sellers need to understand that there's some flexibility. They need to have some flexibility in their planning of the closing process. We're going to offer an addendum for buyers and sellers to use in the contracts that gives some extra time for that process, since that issue isn't something buyers or sellers have control over. We want to give them some flexibility there. And there are some things to keep in mind, particularly from a buyer's standpoint and a seller's standpoint to some degree in the process with these changes. One is, if you are buying a house, selling a house and buying another house, and typically that's called a back-to-back closing where you buy and sell the same day. We'd suggest, or it's been suggested throughout the industry, that that's something you try to avoid, because if there's a delay with the first closing, then that closing may have to be put off from anywhere from 1 to 5 days before it can close again. Of course, then the domino effect on your second close, then that falls apart too. So you want to have a few days between your back-to-back closings to give you time. If one slows down, then you've still got time to manage the second closing. The other thing to be aware of as a buyer standpoint is a lot of buyers set up their move-in day the day of or the day after closing. So the moving trucks are there ready to go. And it's been recommended to us that that's something you be very careful of and allow at least, they're recommending 10 days after the projected closing date. Set your move-in date at least 10 days after that, just in case that projected move-in date gets moved, because at the time you're setting your moving van dates, you probably won't have come to closing yet, so you're going to have to sort of be guessing there. So we think 10 days guessing time will give you enough time to do that. So overall, in that process, just as a buyer and a seller after August 1st, and this is just for loan applications taken after August 1st, add a little patience to that process, and things will go pretty smooth. Again, great market in Washtenaw as it continues, probably the strongest in the state of Michigan right now. Some signs of settling, but overall really good numbers. Thanks.